See and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, sir. If I may call Mr. Bansal.
Certainly.
And if you repeat after me.
Yep.
Chris, I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Take a seat.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Bansal.
Good morning.
As you know, my name is Sam Stevens and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please could I ask you to state your full name?
Stephen Bansal.
Thank you for giving evidence today to the inquiry, both in the written form which we're about to turn to and orally today as well. In front of you, I see you have a bundle of documents, at the front of which should be your witness statement.
Cheers.
And that's dated the 9th of August of 2022 and runs to 7 pages. Is that right?
That is correct.
Have you had a chance to read that statement recently?
I have.
Could I ask you please to turn to page 7 of that statement? Is that your signature?
It is.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. That statement now stands as evidence in the inquiry. I will now turn to ask you some further questions on it. Let's start with when you joined Peritus Limited. That was in October '97 as a training instructor. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, just for background, Peritus Limited was a company subcontracted by ICL Pathway to deliver training to end users of the Horizon system. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
You say in your statement that you weren't solely limited to the Horizon project, but delivered training to a number of different projects. Is that right?
That's correct.
And because of the passage of time, your recollection has faded, and you cannot necessarily say which of your recollections refer to the Horizon project itself and which refer to others.
That is correct.
I understand that you delivered on either basis a agreed training plan to end users, but you weren't involved in designing the training program itself. Is that right?
Excuse me. Not technically true. I did put together some of the training that trained the trainers in preparation for some of the pathway.
I see.
Training.
So the people who would eventually go out to train the end users, you helped put together documentation for training those trainers.
Correct, at the time.
At the time. So that's 97.
97.
You say that in the delays to the rollout of the Horizon IT system, because of that, you transferred to ICL Pathway to work as a trainee tester. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when the further officers started rolling out in 99 with the national rollout in 2000, did you return as a trainer to train people on rollout, or did you remain in testing?
No, I remained in testing.
Did you have any knowledge of the training then after you left Peritus Limited?
None at all.
I'd like to refer to your witness statement, please. The reference is WITN 04770100. And please could we turn to page 6, paragraph 19. Thank you. The second sentence, it says that you received feedback reviews from my Peritus manager at the time, which collated comments from sub-postmasters in respect of training. I also read the feedback forms and requested feedback directly from the attendees, as it was important to me that the training had been received and understood. Just to clarify, the feedback you're referring to there, is that personally to you, how you delivered the training, or on the course as it was as a whole?
A combination of the two. So if I recall, and it is vague memory, there were effectively two forms for the attendees to complete. One was on the training itself, the content, duration, was it technically sufficient? And then the second was on the trainer, how they delivered, what their technique was like. Were you as an individual comfortable with the information that had been passed to you?
But the forms you read, they were the ones completed in relation to training you delivered, rather than you didn't look at other trainers.
No,
feedback.
it was a case of collecting the data at the time and then perusing it before returning it to the office, and indeed at the time talking to the attendees.
Please can we go to page 3 of the same statement and paragraph 12. This describes the cash account, or you've put a subheading cash account. And then over the page, the final sentence says that I do not recall having any experience of working with the cash account software. Does this mean that you didn't train end users on how to use the EPOS application or how to balance?
So I don't believe so. I think at the time, it's part of that. I don't have an awful lot of recollection at all of what the actual specific training was. I don't believe it would have covered cash account at that time, but I can't say categorically no.
I want to move on now then to testing. Your evidence is that you transferred from Peritus to ICL pathway, as we say, as this trainee tester. Could I ask, at the time, what qualifications in IT did you have?
At the time, I did not have specific IT qualifications. I think the position was that the rollout or the training of the trainers was paused because the project itself was at a pause. At the time, I was informed that we were unsure whether that would be a 3-month pause, a 6-month pause. And because of the information and the training that I'd gathered, Pathway, Peritas, made the decision that it would be useful if I were to support the testing community because of some of the knowledge I'd picked up. So initially I was there purely to support and give a different perspective to the testing.
And just to clarify, had you worked in IT as a tester prior to that point?
No.
Did you receive training from Pathway on your role as a trainee tester?
I received on-the-job training. As I say, initially I was there to support, but then I ended up shadowing the testers and gradually built my level of experience and knowledge.
I'd like to turn to a document. The reference is FUJ 58375. And this document is titled Direct Interface Testing Specification, Pathway to HAPS. We'll come to the acronyms in a moment. If we could just move down slightly on the screen, please. Thank you. At the bottom, you'll see you are the author. Do you recall writing this document first?
I vaguely recall writing it, yes. It was quite some time ago, but yes.
On that, it's quite some time ago. Apologies, if I could now ask us to go a bit further up the document to the top, we'll see the date is 3rd February 1998. Now, in your statement, you say that you joined as a trainee tester in April 1998. So you must have presumably joined the testing team before then.
Formally, I think I joined, effectively my contract with Peritas ended. My new contract with Pathway effectively started in April. Prior to that, I was effectively on loan to the testing community. So I'd been there for some time.
So can you give any indication, just to place how long you've been in the testing team at this point? At this point, roughly how long had you been working on testing?
I'm afraid I couldn't say.
Please, could we turn to page 5 of this document? And the introduction says that this document details the direct interface test specification between Pathway AP system, Now, stopping there, that's the Pathway Automated Payment System, isn't it?
That's correct.
It goes on, and POCL, POCL HAP system, that being Post Office Counters Limited Host Automated Payment System.
Correct.
And when we're talking about the interface here, or in simple terms, are we saying what you're testing is how data is transmitted from the Pathway Automated Payment System
Yeah.
to POCL's back-end system?
From APS to HAPS.
And the document goes on to say that it identifies the requirements that will be used to accomplish direct interface testing between POCL and Pathway. As such, this document must be owned and approved by POCL, Pathway, and the PDA. And indeed, if we can turn to page 2 of the document, please, and go down to Approval Authority. We see there are 3 approvals: Simon Palladino, Pathway; John Robson, POCL; and John Bruce, PDA. Could I ask what the role of the approval authorities was in relation to this document?
To review and approve the document.
And did they have any input into its content from your recollection?
Not from my recollection.
Would it have been possible to conduct this testing, the direct interface testing, without input from Post Office Counters Limited?
I don't think so.
Please could we turn to page 10 of the same document and go down to heading 4. As each party will use its own fault reporting system, Pathway will log any incidents using the fault reporting system Pinnacle. The incident number will be passed back for future progression and clearance. So in essence, is that any problem that arose during testing will be logged on Pinnacle on Pathway's side?
Yes.
If we could go back to your witness statement, please. That's WITN 04770100, page 5, paragraph 16. Thank you. You say, in my role as trainee tester, I was given scripts to run in order to test the equipment and/or counter. I would then record the result of the test and feed the results back to the Fujitsu test manager. It is my understanding that the Fujitsu test manager will communicate the results of the tests with the relevant post office test manager. So just to take it in stages, were you involved in passing on any information about testing to the post office itself?
I suspect I was, yes, at some stage.
And in what forum would that be? How would you pass on the information?
Potentially there may have been tri-party calls, there would have been emails, and potentially through reporting of the testing that was carried out.
And do you recall the type of information that you would have provided to post office counters?
At the time, and I can't say this because I don't actually recall it, but my assumption is that I would have been passing on details of the Pinnacle reference number and the faults that were found.
And could you just give an overview of the types of areas that you were testing? We've seen here the interface. What else did you test in your role as trainee tester?
I don't have a good recollection of that at all, I'm afraid.
In respect of where you say your understanding was that the Fujitsu test manager would communicate the results of the tests with the relevant post office test manager, what is the basis of that understanding?
Again, from my recollection when I did the witness statement back in August, is that I wasn't leading any of the discussions. There was always a senior either tester or manager in the meetings initially with myself and any tri-party meetings.
Are you aware of any formal procedures or protocols that were in place regarding the communication of test results?
I can't say that I am. I think that it generally was agreed. Again, my recollection is vague, but I think the principle was that if there was a meeting, then it were documented as part of that meeting. If it was a pinnacle, and as I say, or if the post office or PDA had any issues, they would be reported via a mail into us.
So overall, your understanding is that things were passed across at these meetings, possibly emails as well, but is it fair to say your recollection is...
It is very vague, I'm afraid.
And my understanding is that you remained in a testing role until 2002 when you left ICL Pathways. Is that right?
That is correct.
You then returned to then Fujitsu in 2007.
Correct.
And at this stage, legacy, what's been known as Legacy Horizon, was still in use, but it was looking for gearing towards changing to Horizon Online and developing Horizon Online. And I understand you were involved in the development of Horizon Online.
In, again, the testing of Horizon Online.
Now, the inquiry will be considering the design, development and testing of Horizon Online in greater detail in due course. I want to limit what we discussed to a few small points, and starting with testing, if I may. Please could we bring up POL 000-29327. So this document, and I'll ask you for your help with the title, is HNGX ITU VNI Business Continuity High Level Test Plan. And it says you're the author at the bottom. Could you please provide a summary of what this document is describing?
It is validation and integration, and it is business continuity. So it's effectively providing assurance around resilience, business continuity, that the infrastructure will cope with a level of impact. So if let's say a server was to go down, that we have sufficient resilience that a single server going down won't impact service, and that the service itself will fail over to another component providing the resilience. And potentially also the business continuity, so if we were to fall into a disaster recovery scenario, that potentially we could move from one site, one data center effectively, to another data center and maintain service, albeit there would be a period in which we would have to complete that move.
And this specific area of testing, was this the sole area you were dealing with, or did you deal with others as well?
Potentially I would have dealt with others, but I think this was one of the main areas at the time.
Could I ask just to move down the document to the approval authorities? Again, here we have three approval authorities. There's the HNGX Test Manager, then Andrew Thompson, Post Office Limited Test Manager, and Tony Wicks, Business Continuity Manager. If it's different to what we went before, could I just ask you to explain what the role of the approval authority was for this document?
Again, to review and sanity check the proposal and to provide their approvals from their respective positions.
Do you recall what input Mr. Thompson from the Post Office had on this document?
I can't, I'm afraid.
And once this document was in its complete form, so approved, would a copy be sent to all the relevant approval authorities as well?
That is how the process should work, yes.
Can I move to a different topic, please? And that, if I can bring up document FUJ 30845350. For the well, actually, let's see the sprint. We'll stay there for the moment, but we may want to go to the first page if you need it. But this is a spreadsheet that was provided to the inquiry by Fujitsu, and the file title is 20100526 or underscore CS prayers. It appears to be dated the 26th of May 2010. Please, could you clarify what CS prayers are?
I think it's customer services prayers, and prayers would be a meeting that's held in the morning to discuss issues.
And did you attend those prayers meetings?
I believe I would have attended on occasion, yes.
We're looking here at the closed tab. You see at the bottom it says closed. And in row 124, column C refers to a problem saying more than 2,000 critical events per day. In column F, there are a series, what I presume to be dates, listing various various entries. And at 9.2 in F, it says Steve Bansal running analysis on all events to see what can be done. Do you have any recollection of this, these events, or what this means?
Bear with me, I'll just...
Of course.
No, I can't say with any certainty.
Are you able to help with what a critical event would be generally?
A critical event could be a counter going offline. It could be many things.
You can't assist. Yeah, no, thank you. We can take that document down now, thank you. Moving on from Horizon Online, your witness statement states that you became a problem manager in around 2010, and that at this point was as a full-time employee.
That is correct.
Again, the inquiry will be investigating the identification and rectification of bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon IT system in due course. But I'd like to explore some general points on the problem management system with you first. Please, can I bring up the following document, FUJ 30080043. This is titled the RMGA Customer Service Problem Management Process, and it's the second version. Does RMGA stand for Royal Mail Group Account?
It does.
And it states that this is a process definition to describe and document the customer service problem management process. Now, the document was drafted on the 22nd of April 2008, so before your time as a problem manager.
Yes.
But would it have described the process of problem management when you became a problem manager in 2010?
The likelihood is yes.
Do you know whether this document, or to your knowledge, was this document an internal one? Actually, if we can scroll down slightly, please, before I put this question. See the distribution list. to your knowledge, was this document purely an internal document, or would the post office have received it?
Based on the information on that page, it would appear to be an internal document.
Please can we turn to page 6 of the document? So in this introduction, it sets out the process, objective and scope of problem management. And a problem is defined as the unknown underlying root cause of one or more incidents. And we see in the documentation a distinction drawn between problems and incidents, or major incidents, with different processes. Please could you help us with what the difference between a problem and the problem management process and an incident and the major incident process is?
Okay. Problem could be raised off of the back of an incident or an issue in a single branch or multiple branches, and we would use the problem itself, the problem ticket, to continue the investigation, the analysis, until such time the incident is resolved. For a major incident, the distinction there is the severity and the priority, and potentially the impact to the wider estate. So a major incident would mean that potentially a greater number of branches are down, they're offline, there is not a service being offered. So the priority there is resolution to get those branches services available as soon as possible. We would then subsequently raise a problem ticket for any outstanding issues where we've not developed, understood the root cause, to continue the investigation. And I think there was an element I haven't covered.
Yeah, well, let's just break it down with that first, so we can understand the difference. So, for example, if there was an unexplained discrepancy of a low amount, say a £5 discrepancy at a single post office reported, would that be classed as an incident in itself?
That would be classed as an incident, yes.
And the underlying cause of that discrepancy, that would be the problem.
Yes.
And a major incident would be, say, if there was a complete outage of service for a period of time which had a very severe effect on the network. But again, the problem is trying to find the underlying cause of that major outage. Is that the distinction?
Correct. It's getting to root cause.
So when we talk about problem management here, we're talking about finding the root causes of bugs, errors, and defects, basically, or trying to find whether there is a bug, error, or a defect.
Correct.
It refers to reactive and proactive problem management, and we're going to, I think, look at that in due course as we go through this document here. Can I start, though, by looking at some of the responsibilities for problem management? And if we turn to page 6 of this document. Or if we're on page 6, if we could go to the bottom of it, please. Thank you. So the first point here is the process owner. And it says the owner of the process is the POA service delivery manager, responsible for the service most affected by the problem. The process owner, otherwise known as the problem manager, is appointed by the service delivery team manager. And so if a problem arose, who would have day-to-day responsibility for the problem management process and seeing that the problem is investigated?
So unless there is a defined problem manager, it would fall to the SDM whose service that problem falls under.
So the SDM being the service delivery manager?
Service delivery manager, correct.
And the service delivery manager, is it the case that a service delivery manager can appoint a problem manager and delegate responsibility for that particular problem?
That can happen.
In 2010, when you were described as a problem manager,
Yes.
were you a person to whom problems would be delegated, or were you a service delivery manager?
I was a problem to whom a person
Person to.
where the problems would be appointed to.
I understand that you became a service delivery manager later in your career. Is that right?
That is correct.
And when did that happen?
2010.
Right. So sorry. So you weren't a problem manager in 2010. You were a service delivery manager in 2010.
My apologies. I started out in the service team as a problem manager, and then moved into becoming a SDM
In the same year.
later in that year, 18 months afterwards. But it was a progression.
Thank you. If we turn over the page, there is a role described as the problem resolver, who's responsible for finding a resolution to the problem. Would that be, for example, someone in the SSC who's actually investigating, running diagnostics?
Possibly someone in the SSC, but it would be someone who has the technical knowledge. So SSC, being the third line support team, would have knowledge, articles and information for them to investigate, but it may be that the resolution would come from the fourth line support. So there isn't a specific problem resolver, and it is allocated by case.
And so your role as problem manager would be to what? To oversee them and well, explain
to ensure the process is followed, and that we have the correct support, etc., and that we're doing the communication both internally and externally.
Looking then at this, how this process works, could we start with problem identification and turn to page 10 of this document with the flow chart at section 4.1.1, please. So we see on the top left there are two ways into the problem management process. Either incident management and alerting of a pattern likely to cause a problem, the far left. Is that what you would describe as proactive problem management, where an incident is detected by Fujitsu itself?
Yes.
And then we also have the major incident management in the second from the left. And we then, it says to open a problem record at 1.1.1 in the middle. The third box on the top, hard to see, but it says incident and problem alerting process. Was there a written procedure for the incident and problem alerting process that you're aware of?
The incident and problem alerting process, to my recollection, would be the daily monitoring that is performed by the SMC. So they would effectively see alerts because they're monitoring the system, and they would then raise an incident. The incident would then be trended, and that would be how we would then raise a problem record.
Well, so that may be a way to opening a problem record, but
Yeah.
Looking at this flow chart,
Yes.
if we look at the box 1.1.1, we're at the stage where a problem record has been opened. And then the flow chart goes off to three boxes. Now, the middle one is start total time clock, and the second one is start, I assume, service level agreement, SLA clock. Is that referring to sort of deadlines for when a problem should be resolved by?
The SLA clock is if there is a service level agreement in place. So at that point, effectively we're starting the clock.
Yeah. So we're in the position where we've got the problem open.
Yes.
So it may have come from the SMC or not. But the box we didn't look at on the left, incident and problem alerting process, do you know to what that refers?
I don't, I'm afraid.
When a problem record was opened, who would be told of the problem or provided with the problem record?
The problem manager would obviously be either made aware or would have raised the ticket themselves. That would then be put onto effectively a spreadsheet, a database, and then that would be informed to the wider account via an update on the actual incident ticket. So the incident ticket would then have a reference back to the problem record. The problem record should then have a reference back to the incident itself.
So you said the wider account, that's the wider group of people within Fujitsu working on this account.
Correct.
If we follow this flowchart through, at the top right we see it says go to A after we've taken these various steps. If we could go to page 12, please, of the document. Thank you. This section concerns classification. And in paragraph 4.1.21, which is just below the flowchart, it asks the problem manager and resolver to capture the sense and respond codes. Could you assist with what those are?
I can't. No. What I would say is that I'm not sure whether how long the sense and response codes were actually in play. And what I would say is that I think we have a matrix which would give us the priority and severity, which I think is further down in the document.
Yes, I want to turn to that now, actually. And we see priority is in a different section. So if you follow it across, it's to 1.2.3. So after the problem's been classified, a priority is set. And in that regard, we look at the appendix to this document. I'd like to look at the final page first, which is page 23, please. So this is a table which says priority, and is this the table to which you were referring to get a priority score for the problem?
Correct.
And on the column on the left, there is an impact score or an impact value of 1 to 5. And then the columns on the top, from second column to the final column, these are urgency scores of 1 to 5, which we'll come to in a moment. But for present purposes, it looks like this ends up with a score, if you combine these two, the impact and the urgency, to get a priority score of somewhere between 1 and 5.
That is correct.
Were there any deadlines, or how were the different scores for priority treated? So how was a 1 priority different from a 2?
So a 1 priority is the most immediate, so effectively resolve this with the highest priority, and a 5 would be the lowest priority.
Were there targets or deadlines for a priority 1 and then a priority 2?
Relating to
how long they needed to be within what time they needed to be resolved?
Within problem management, I don't believe that there was.
In practice, what effect did the priority level have on the speed to which problems were resolved?
If you had a P1, then effectively we would trump any other activity that's going on to be able to call SMEs, the support units, to come and prioritise this work to look at the resolution of the incident or the issue. And bearing in mind it was a problem, that would already have had a high priority incident allocated to it, that activity would have been ongoing. So yes, a higher priority would have meant that people would have paid attention and actually appropriately prioritised the activity.
Is it possible to say, if you gave something a priority 1, within what period of time you would have expected the problem to be resolved?
As I say, with urgency, but a problem is different to an incident. An incident does have a 4-hour SLA or an 8-hour SLA or a 3-day SLA. A problem does not have the same SLAs because those incidents, high priority, are being worked on as part of this problem ticket.
Well, if you look at some of the factors that go into giving us the priority, please can we turn to page 21? Thank you. This first refers to, we see in the bottom, the impact value. There's a table there, but starting at the top, the first step is to give it a criticality value, which there are, again, 5 scores from critical to cosmetic. This would be assigned by the problem manager, is that right?
That is correct. Problem manager and SMEs.
And was there any guidance on what would be determined as a critical, high, medium, or minor?
The critical would be defined as something which has effectively a showstopper on a wider scale. So if we go back to a P1 scenario, almost a disaster, service has stopped, that's regarded as critical. And then we'd go down in severity, down to the things which are cosmetic or minor.
So when you said the showstopper point there, the critical, you suggested that's something that's stopping service, but also would you take into account how many people were?
Absolutely, and I think that's covered in the impact section below.
Yes,
so if it's one user or if it's the entire estate, they will have a different.
So that's taken into account under the impact, but the criticality part, is it fair to say it's just a judgment call and there's no particular written guidance on what is critical and what is medium?
So again, hence why it's the problem manager and the resolver group looking at this, so it's a collective view on how critical things are, and it's not one individual's judgment.
Was there ever an incentive to lower the criticality score or to put in a lower score than you would otherwise would have thought?
No, there was never any pressure to do anything like that.
When we go down to, if we could move down, thank you, to the impact table, the number of users affected, obviously at the top we see it ranges from, on the left, over 70% to, on the right, to a single user, and that affects the overall impact score. Was this number of users affected, was this the number of users that had been affected, or would it be an assessment of how many users may be affected by a problem?
I think for a problem we would take both into account. If the problem was well understood and defined, then potentially you'd be looking at just the affected users, because again we'd be in a position to understand that. If the problem was relatively new and that was still being defined and understood, then we would also look at the potential wider impact and take that into account.
So from a criticality point of view, if say less than 100, say less than 50 sub-postmasters were reporting unexplained discrepancies in their branch accounts, where would that have fallen on the criticality score?
To my mind, that would have been a critical.
That would have been
That would have been a critical. If you're getting that many postmasters reporting something of that nature, that's something that needs to be looked at with urgency.
So that's if they report all at once. If it's just a single discrepancy that's been reported, how would that change things?
That would change things, because until we've done some trending along that, we don't know where those discrepancies are. They could be related, they may not be related. So we would, as part of the problem review, pull together any child incidents to see if they actually are related.
Can we turn the page, please, to the urgency score on page 22? Now, before I ask you about the detail of it, in broad terms, can you explain how the impact score differed from the urgency score?
Sorry, my mind's gone blank. Could you repeat
Yeah,
the
of course.
question?
In what way, what different considerations or what different considerations would you take into account when arriving at an urgency score in comparison to the impact score?
I guess we would look at what potentially may unfold over the next period. Depending on where the scenario of the issue is, it could be that with the batch processing that happens overnight, that may then add to the severity or the impact of the issue. And it could be that during a working day, there is the opportunity to support the postmasters, support the post office with a resolution. So that would make that resolution within that time span far more urgent than if there was a roll-on impact of an overnight batch.
So let's look at what the urgency table says and go through it there. And for the first level, which is the most urgent, it says it has a significant adverse impact on the delivery of service to a large number of end users, causes significant financial loss and/or disruption, results in any material loss or corruption of customer data. And it says, for example, incidents with this urgency may affect the company. What company is being referred to there when it says the company?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Would it be the post office as a whole rather than individual sub-postmasters?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
The urgency value 1, as we say, it refers to significant financial loss or disruption. The second score, it says it causes, urgency score 2. It says causes a financial loss and or disruption to the customer, which is more than trivial but less severe than the significant financial loss described in the definition of an urgency level 1. Are you aware of any guidance on how a problem manager was to distinguish between trivial or significant financial loss or somewhere in between?
No specific guidance.
It says, for example, at the bottom of urgency score 2, it says, for example, incidents with this urgency may affect a VIP site. Do you know to what that refers?
I think historically, Post Office did have a number of sites that they determined as VIP. And yeah, I'll say no more.
Could we look at an actual problem report? It's POL 30295568. And you see, this is a problem report. It says it affects 14 branches. It was reported by Steve Parker, and you're listed as the problem manager. Now, this concerns a bug in the system, which is described by Mr. Justice Fraser as bug number 3, the suspense account bug. And in essence, what this document shows or suggests is in some branches there was data entered into the local suspense account that was relevant to balancing in trading periods 9 and 10 in 2010 and 11. And this data in the suspense account was retained in the database. Therefore, when the branches came to balance in the corresponding trading periods 9 and 10 in later years, that 2010 data was reused incorrectly. Is that a fair summary of the problem?
I believe so, yes.
And whilst branches had experienced the error in 2012, it was only reported to Fujitsu in 2013. Is that right?
As I understand it, yes.
If you could move down, please, the page. We see at this stage, 14 branches are listed as having discrepancies. Some of them are small amounts. For example, the third one down is 1 pence. But as you see, the fourth one down is £9,799.88. Could we go to the top of the table, please? Again. Thank you. Now, this was given an urgency score by you of 2. Could you explain why this had an urgency score of 2?
I think at the time, because there were 14 branches, and because at the time we were looking to get the investigation underway, so I think, if memory serves, this had come through to us from Post Office, so we raised an immediate problem record to do effectively a historical investigation into those 14 branches. That's why I think it was a 2 rather than a 1.
When you were in a case like this, when you're giving an urgency score, would you consult the appendix to which we just referred, or was it more of a sense of experience and feel to what score you would give ascribe an urgency score?
So I think I can't hand on heart say that I looked at the appendix for this one. I think I may have done, I may not have done, so I can't comment, but normally I think the advice to the problem management team is to look at the appendix.
Please could we go back to the appendix, and it's FUJ 3080043, and turn to page 23. On what you've just said, the paragraph below the table does say, for example, if the agent decides that the urgency value is 3 and the impact has been calculated as 2, then from the priority table, the final priority will be automatically generated as 2. The assigned priority can be overridden if the problem is serious and discussed with the service delivery team leader, but the problem management process must be followed. Now, in the problem record there that we just looked at, the priority score that given was 4. If we look on the urgency score, for an urgency score of 2, the only priority scores you can give are 1, 2, 3, 3, and 5. Could you assist with why you considered that or gave the priority score of 4 for that problem?
I'm afraid I can't.
In practice, giving it a score of 4 rather than say 3, would that what difference do you think that would have made in practice to how the problem was resolved?
On this occasion, I don't think an awful lot. Having read through the rest of the pack, I know that particular issue was dealt with by a number of people, and I think there were a number of high priority peaks that were raised, and the investigation was quite intensive.
Well, you've raised it. Let's look at that. That it's POL 3029671. And could we turn to page 6, please? There's an entry, 6th of March 2013. And I should say, for the record, that this peak is the peak referred to in the problem report we've just seen. But the entry on the 6th of March 2013 at 4:05 says there was a conference call with Paul, Laura Darby, Mark Wardle and others on the 8th of February about this call, and the spreadsheet showing the impact of the problem on the 14 branches was sent to them by Steve Bansal We are waiting to hear from Mark whether this is sufficient information for them to resolve the consequences on the branches and Polsap. So do you recall how this problem was resolved thereafter following this call?
I don't.
And you mentioned that you remember this in particular, that there were several people on it. Was this problem given more resources than, say, another priority 4 problem would be given?
I think that in this particular scenario, I think Anne Chambers, it was her priority. She effectively dropped all other work, to my approximate knowledge, as it were, and this was her main focus. I believe there was another week open, and I think that in the background other teams were also looking at different aspects in support of this. So Anne wasn't looking at this on her own. There were wider teams looking at the scenarios and the issues.
So I don't know if you want to have a break this morning, but this would be a good point to break for the hour mark.
Yeah, well, certainly that's okay. All I don't want to do is to have a break and then have another long break, if you see what I mean. How are we going with the witness generally?
Quicker than, yes, there's probably about the same again, maybe less.
Okay, so should we, let's ask Mr. Bansal, if we have, say, a 10-minute break now, should we then complete his evidence without having a formal lunch break, so that would take us to maybe 1:30, or would he prefer to have a formal lunch break at 1 o'clock?
I'm easy to go through.
You prefer to go through?
I prefer to go through rather than stop for lunch.
Yeah, and is that all right with you, Mr. Stevens?
It is, sir.
Fine, so we'll have a 10-minute break now and then complete Mr. Bansal's evidence, and that will be it for the day, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Fine.
Sir, can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal. We'll continue, and could we please bring up on the screen POL 3029671. I'm terribly sorry, that's my error in the reference. It's FUJ 30080043. Thank you. And if you could turn to page 13. Sorry, page 14. Thank you. So you see, once we've got the priority, it goes into this flow chart of managing root cause process and establishing corrective action. And it's at this point, I assume, where the problem resolver takes over the mainstay of the technical work.
Yes.
Now, as a problem manager at this stage, how do you review, or how in 2010, how would you review or keep track of how problems were being resolved or diagnosed?
So we would have regular meetings with the resolver and possibly the support teams to understand exactly where we are with getting to resolution.
And would the regularity of those meetings be connected to the priority of the problem, or?
Yes, if it was a high priority incident, then we would be having almost daily conversations to track progress. But again, we would also be reliant on the SME, the support teams, providing sufficient feedback to determine the regularity of those conversations. Again, yeah.
Could we turn to page 16, please. Now, this is, again, part of this error control process, and the step in the flowchart here at 231 says assess if permanent solution is required. And it gives options, 8 options for this assessment, ranging from impact minimal, not cost justifiable, with other ones requiring, says resolution requires POL funding or resolution requires action by POL. I want to look at the first two. Would anyone from the post office be involved in this assessment of whether a permanent solution was required?
Yes, they should be. So we would hold a regular review of problem records with the post office, and we would take to them our findings. And if we were in a scenario where we had to look at the justification in this manner, if it wasn't apparent, i.e. that we have to fix it, then we would have a conversation with post office.
And these meetings in 2010, let's start around that point, how often would you have those meetings with post office?
I can't say with absolute certainty. I would suggest minimally at a month, but I can't say any with any greater recall.
And at these meetings, would you discuss all active problems or a certain priority of problems?
I think the approach would be that we would discuss all active problems, but with the priority given to those that are of the highest urgency, priority, hot topics, etc. And then you would work your way down the list.
So where it says in this chart, 2.3.2, impact minimal, not cost justifiable. So if the problem resolver had found a bug in the Horizon system that Fujitsu had provided to the post office, to whom was the cost not justifiable to enter a permanent solution? Fujitsu or the post office?
That would be determined by what the root cause of the problem was.
Well, you identified the root cause of the problem, and now the question is what action to take with it. And one of the options is not to do anything, or not to implement a permanent fix, because it's not cost justifiable.
Yes.
But whose costs are we looking
So
at here?
again, that is dependent on the resolution. If what is found to be the case is that it's missing requirements or incorrectly stated requirements originally, then that may be something that we would look to post office. Because it's a change of requirements, they would need to confirm that what they would like is that issue addressed with a new set of requirements.
So that would be covered, would it, by, if we look in this diagram, 2.3.8, resolution requires POL funding, or 2.3.9, resolution requires action by POL?
Correct.
So in 2.3.2, not cost justifiable, does that refer to cost to Fujitsu?
No, that would also refer to cost to post office. So I see what you're saying, but it falls into that category as well. So yes, there may be an occasion where Fujitsu, depending on what the impact is, may say it's not justified, as post office might have done historically as well.
So in what circumstances would the Fujitsu say the cost to them meant it was unjustifiable to implement a permanent fix?
So it could be that the impact is only to our support teams. So if it means that we see something within our monitoring, let's say our error handling, and it effectively, we could then potentially ignore that particular scenario. So what we then do is write a knowledge base article to that effect, so we don't then have to put in a software or a hardware update to resolve that. So it's cheaper therefore to put together the knowledge article in that scenario, when we see that again, we know that under those circumstances, we can ignore that event.
And you said that the post office were involved in this assessment. What happened if there was a divergence of views on the whether or not to implement a fix due to...
Then we would follow the customer's recommendation.
Please can we bring up another document? It's FUJ 3085191. This is another spreadsheet. I think we're on the first page there, and it was provided to the inquiry by Fujitsu. The title was POLS, or Pol's Weekly Problem Review 24/10/13. Do you recognise this type of document?
I do recognise this type of document.
Who created this, or not specifically which person, but which corporate entity would create this document?
I'm going to say I'm a little bit hazy whether it would have been something that Fujitsu produced or whether it's something Post Office produced, but it was something that we reviewed collectively and updated collectively.
Can you recall when spreadsheets like this were used for collective discussions first?
Can't say that I can recall when it started or whether it was practice when I joined.
In terms of the meetings you discussed earlier about going through various problems
Yes.
that you'd have, you said the least regular intervals monthly.
Yes.
You couldn't remember how often precisely.
Yes.
Would this be the document that was used?
This would be the type of thing, yes.
The type of thing.
So, again, just to your point, I think when I initially started as a problem manager, it was monthly, but to my recollection at that time, I found that to be insufficient, so I brought that forward to fortnightly, and then that also was quite slow, so we went to a weekly meeting.
And at these meetings, who from Paul, or at least who, in terms of what job roles from Paul would attend? I should say at Post Office, which job roles from Post Office would attend?
Yeah, so I think we would have some representation from Post Office from a service perspective. We would have, I'm going to suggest some SDMs and a senior service person. From memory, I'm not going to say names because I can't remember all of them, but certainly there was at least two to three people at all of these meetings early on.
Could we now just turn to the closed tab, please, on the spreadsheet? And if we could go to row 20. Thank you. I think what we'll need to do, if we could drag the row 20 down so that it's much. I think if you go to the left there, and yes, thank you, drag it down, we'll get that detail in. Thank you very much. So this we see from column D. This refers to the 14 branches and the local suspense account issue. And we have in column F, which is titled Supplier Updates, a series of entries with dates. And if we could go across to column G, which is titled Poll Updates, there are also entries on dates as well, not necessarily the same. How were these columns updated? Can you recall?
Yeah, they were potentially during the meetings. As we mentioned earlier, we would go down the priority list, and we would look for updates from either side on the particular issues.
Who maintained that? Because if this is a updating document that's
Yes.
used for meetings, was there a master copy, or was someone responsible for maintaining a master copy?
I'm going to say that I think the master copy was held with Fujitsu and was shared post every meeting with the post office representatives.
Thank you. We can take that document down now. Could we please bring up FUJ 3085175? So we were previously looking at version 2 of the customer service problem management procedure before the break. This is, if we go to the bottom, version 2.3, which I understand means it's in draft form. Is that right? It's a draft, not approved version.
I can't see approved on here.
If we go up, slightly,
Yes.
draft version.
Yeah.
At page 4, go to the bottom, please. You're listed as a mandatory reviewer, so presumably you would have seen this document at the time.
I would have done.
Please can we turn to page 9 of the same document. Under heading, could we go to heading 1.5.1? This says the problem records for the post office account are held on the, is it Trioli, thank you, service desk system. Who would have access to the Trioli service desk system?
Fujitsu staff.
Post office didn't have
Oh.
access to that.
Don't believe so, no.
Over the page, if we may. It refers to, at the top, problem managers can access the problem action plans by, and then it gives a reason, the way to do it. And it says these reports are held within a spreadsheet which contains 3 tabs: Horizon, PulseApp and Closed. Is that referring to the spreadsheet or the types of spreadsheet we were seeing, but we just took you to?
I believe so.
Please could we move to a different document? It's FUJ 3085985. We see from it, it says there's a note on the third, so the second paragraph of the substance. Note Jan 2018. Document updated to reflect the changes on the POA accounts. We've jumped forward quite a bit. Have you seen this document before?
I think I have seen this document before, yes.
Do you know, it says IP handover, do you know what it was drawn up for?
Sorry, could you?
So do you know for what purpose this document was drawn?
Yes, it was effectively a task list for IPs.
IPs being?
IP, industrial placement.
And these people would help with the problem management and incident management processes?
They would help with various tasks across the service team to give them some scope and bandwidth of some training and some understanding of how business works.
Could you turn to page 4, please? This refers to the ATOS problem spreadsheet. I think at this stage it would be helpful to introduce ATOS. Could you state how ATOS fit into the problem management process?
So I think at the time, Post Office effectively brought in a managing agent to work on their behalf, and as part of that, they procured a problem management service through Atos.
Atos. And so Atos were, when it says Atos problem spreadsheet, and we're talking about Atos, that is people contracted by the Post Office.
Yes.
And it says that the problem spreadsheet to Atos problem management with Fujitsu updates, which are discussed on the weekly problem management call every Friday. I think earlier in your evidence you referred to these calls going from a monthly to a fortnightly and then an even shorter period of time. Do you have any recollection as to when they went to weekly calls?
I don't, I'm afraid.
The spreadsheet that's referred to, is it basically, was it in a similar form to the spreadsheet we looked at earlier?
I believe so.
So fundamentally, the process the process you're describing hadn't changed, just the frequency of the
Yes.
the meetings.
Yes. And actually, I think if you go back to the other spreadsheet, that might give an indication of the regularity of that particular spreadsheet, whether that was weekly.
When due course of the inquiry, we can look at the documents to see that, but thank you. Can we please move to page 12 of this document? Now, this talks about peak reporting. Now, the inquiry's heard a lot about pinnacles because of the time frame, but peaks were effectively the same as pinnacles in order that they, the peak system was a system in which problems were recorded, and it was a flow of the information done to rectify those problems. Is that fair? It was a log, basically, of actions taken.
It was, or it could be used in that form, yes.
Was there any material difference between the peak and the pinnacle systems?
At a high level, I'm going to say I don't believe so.
The page 12 says that these instructions are to generate a peak report for Steve Bansal in preparation for the leadership team meeting on Friday. Who attended the leadership team meeting?
That would be an internal Fujitsu meeting from recollection.
And what was its purpose?
To provide an update to the leadership team on the status of service.
And with these peak reporting of peaks, the second paragraph says, as peak reporting is used to keep track of the trend of peaks, and goes on to say about when there's a sudden increase or decrease. Could you explain what Fujitsu did in respect of trend analysis? How did it analyse trends in peaks?
We would have members of the service team and the MAC team looking at trends effectively, if we were seeing an increase and if we were seeing an increase or a decrease, in which areas, and was that associated to any new releases, was that associated to any updates that had gone out, positive or negative. We needed to understand what was going on and then potentially proactively be able to get ahead of any issues as well.
So who within Fujitsu, was responsible for that trend analysis?
So responsibility for it would ultimately come to myself in that particular phase, but it was a number of teams that were producing that activity.
And which teams would they be?
So I think at the time they were I think they're currently called the MAC team, and I can't for the life of me remember what they were called then.
We at the start of your evidence, near the start, we discussed proactive problem management. Presumably, this is an example of proactive problem management, analysing the trends of peaks.
Yes. Yeah, so the peaks will be done via that team. Apologies to talk across you. And the problem manager would be doing the problem effectively trending, but the two should meet.
Was there anything else other than this peak those 2 points you said that Fujitsu did in respect of proactive problem management?
I'm going to say probably yes, but I can't. Nothing is coming to mind. Apologies.
Before moving on, could we please move to page 16? This refers to major incident reports, and when we discussed this earlier, you referred to a major incident being a particular incident that had a significant effect on the network, or it was particularly severe.
Yes.
And in this, it says, starting with the second line, in the event of a major incident, you alongside the rest of the team will be expected to drop whatever you are doing to manage the issue in the most effective way. We don't need to read the second paragraph. The next one is, when producing the major incident report, you will be assisted by the duty manager who was running the incident, who will provide you with a detailed timeline of events, including calls that were made and resolution steps taken by the individual teams. With this information, you'll be doing the typing of the first draft using the account template. Once you have completed the report, you will review with the relevant parties, e.g. duty manager involved and Steve Bansal, before sending the report to Steve Bansal. From this point, Steve will make the final edits and send to the customer. Your main job is to type up the report and make sure all detail is recorded. Steve will make the decision to remove any unnecessary detail. So in respect of major incidents, you were the sort of final point of call over the final interface of information between Fujitsu and the post office.
Correct.
And what type of, when it says you would make the decision to remove any unnecessary detail, what types of thing would you remove? Would it be substantive or?
They would be what I call the he said, she said. So effectively some of the chit chat. So again, the purpose of having an IP recording what was going on effectively as a transcript almost. They would document everything that was kind of said, and when that then came to me to review, I would remove some of that because it wouldn't be pertinent to the actual final report.
Were you ever under any pressure to downplay an incident?
No. No.
Please, can we?
Apologies. I was going to say that while the report is being produced and while the major incident is ongoing, I would have open dialogue with my post office counterpart, and I would be providing them the updates. And that's before and after a major incident. So the technical written would support everything I've been saying to them.
Can we please go back to FUJ 3085175? And can we please turn to page 9? So this was the document we were looking at a moment ago, version 2.3 of the problem management process. And 1.4 refers to metrics to be reported monthly, which will be used to measure effectiveness of the process and drive performance of the process and overall service in general. And that included things such as number and impact of incidents occurring before root problem is identified and resolved. Do you know who was responsible for including this in this document?
I think at the time it was my predecessor or my manager at the time.
Please can we now turn to, on this issue, to the Horizon Issues judgment, which can be found at Pol 3022840 on page 97. This section, Mr. Justice Fraser is making findings on Mr. Goddeseth's evidence. Presumably you know Mr. Goddeseth as a member of Fujitsu as well.
Correct.
And at paragraph 322, Mr. Justice Fraser refers to a later version of the problem management document we've been discussing. So, as you'll see in the second line, it refers to being copyrighted in 2017. At paragraph 324, he refers to paragraph 1.4 of that document. It says the following metrics to be reported monthly will be used to measure effectiveness of the process and drive performance of the process and overall service in general. And over the page, we see the list which we saw in the document previously. If we could go down, please, to 325. Thank you. It says that the claimant sought to obtain reports that would have been expected to exist as a result of this policy. And it says that Fujitsu stated through the Post Office's solicitors that Fujitsu believes that it does not record problems in such a way that would allow this to be determined without retrospectively carrying out detailed analyses, and that it would require a disproportionate effort and cost to provide these. Mr. Justice Fraser then quotes from Mr. Goddesseth's evidence, and he says, "I have spoken to my colleague Steve Bansal, Fujitsu's Senior Service Delivery Manager, who has informed me that the Post Office account customer service problem management procedure document was introduced by Sahid Salawu, Fujitsu's former Horizon Lead Service Delivery Manager, and that Sahid Salawu left the Fujitsu Post Office account in around February 2013, before the new procedure had been implemented. I understand from Steve that Sahid Salawu's replacement did not wish to implement the changes, and therefore the records referred to by Mr. Coyne in paragraphs 5.157 to 5.159 of his report do not exist, as we continue to follow the previous existing reporting methodology." Do you recall having a conversation like that with Mr. Goddesseth?
I do.
And is Mr. Goddesseth's evidence correct in that regard?
It is.
So the 1.4 documentation and procedures were never implemented?
They were not implemented.
Why was that?
I think when I then subsequently took over, in my view, most of the data was being captured in alternate locations, not necessarily as a specific problem KPI dashboard, shall we say, and the majority of that information was being discussed with Post Office. So if I took those points and reviewed them in the context of that meeting that we were having weekly, those points were being picked up. What I didn't do was put them into a dashboard.
So, I mean, Fujitsu, through the Post Office's solicitors, is recorded to have said that to retrospectively carry out detailed analyses, it would require a disproportionate effort and cost to provide these. If we could go up the page. Would it have been difficult to ascertain these issues or ascertain this data retrospectively?
I think some of the data would have been available, but I don't think it would have been easy to have then subsequently collated all of it. As I say, some of those points I think are discussed, but is it there for anyone to root out? I don't think so. And depending on how far back anyone would like anyone to go to retrieve that historical data would take some effort.
Do you think it would have been helpful to have this information available in a dashboard form, as you suggested?
With hindsight, yes.
Please can we move to another document? It's FUJ 3085953. So this is a 2015 Post Office Account Problem Management Problem Review. And the abstract says the report contains a trend analysis of the 34 problem records raised in the Post Office Account Problem Management TFS database during 2015. Is the TFS database, is that the Trioli
Yes, Trioli for Service.
service? Can you recall when this type of annual review was first conducted?
Possibly 13 onwards,
And do you know why it was implemented?
because I didn't have that information, so I requested it to commence,
And what did you want that information for?
so I could do a review of the problems, and then I would have effectively a year-on-year view of what was going on, so I could trend at a much bigger scale.
Was this an internal document, or was it shared with the Post Office?
I think it's internal.
That document can be taken down, please. And if we can go to POL 030298084. And if you could go to the email at the bottom, please. It's in an email chain in September 2010 from Gareth Jenkins. Did you know Gareth Jenkins?
Yes, I did.
Did you work with him?
I worked with him on occasion, yes.
His role at this stage was distinguishing engineer. What does that mean? Or how did you see his role in Fujitsu at this point?
I saw him as a 4LS, so fourth line support. He was an architect and an SME.
Here he's referring to a receipts and payments mismatch issue, and he attached a document, and this has now become known as the receipts and payments mismatch bug. Are you aware of the nature of that bug?
I am, at a high level, yes.
Just for ease, could you give your high level description of the bug and how it operated?
So I think effectively the not sure how to put it into words, but I'm going to say no then.
But if it was a case, was it where postmasters would try to do a trial balance, so they wouldn't do a complete balance, but would try to do a trial balance, and there would be a discrepancy that they were asked to put into the whether they wanted to put it into the local suspense account. Does that sound?
That sounds about right.
Right so far.
Say it has suspense account.
And then if you cancelled at that stage, and you were taken back to another screen where you're given various options. But when they cancelled, in the local cache, the counter's own system, the discrepancy was zeroized. Does this sound right? So
It does it, yes.
so far, and the problem was if they rolled over again from that point, there would be that the fact the discrepancy at zeroized wouldn't be essentially recognised, and there would be a discrepancy between what was the counter showed and what was in the actual back-end systems. At a high level, does that
At a high level, I think that sounds.
So that's going back to one of the problems we said earlier in terms of problems. That's a really quite a significant problem.
That's a very significant problem.
And in this email, the third paragraph down, Mr. Jenkins says, we probably need to formally raise this as a problem with Paul. I'm not sure how this is done, but presumably you could initiate that. We should then plan to do the initial analysis and provide Paul with a view as to the scope, and then agree how to progress it. Why do you think it is that a senior member of Fujitsu's frontline staff was not aware how to formally raise a problem at this point?
I can't comment on that, but yeah, no, I can't comment on that.
Are you aware of any steps that Fujitsu took to make its own staff aware of the problem management process?
I think that it is done not necessarily by a broadcast or a communication, but the wider account are aware that the service team have a problem management function, because they are involved, shall we say. Third line, fourth line are all aware of the problem management function, and as I say, they do support it. So I'm not sure why Mr. Jenkins didn't know how the process worked.
If we go to the top of this email, we see that Mark Wright subsequently sends you this.
Yes.
Were you the problem manager?
I then picked this up, yes.
In broad terms, do you remember how the problem was handled?
Excuse me. So I think from that point on, we raised the problem record. We got Gareth was more heavily involved to do his analysis. When we discussed it, my feeling was that we would need what I called a white paper, just a paper that would go through in detail, because as I failed to articulate the summary of the scenario back to you, is because I think it was quite complex. And so what I asked Gareth to do was to actually write it up in a white paper. So effectively, when we communicated with Post Office, we were clear in what the issue was, what the scenarios were, and where we'd got to with our investigation. And it was that paper that I subsequently shared with Post Office. And I think thereafter there were multiple conversations which Gareth and occasionally I was also party to.
Right. Can we leave that there then, thank you, and move to one final, penultimate point, and it concerns a briefing to the NFSP. Please, can we bring up Poll 402091? So this is a Fujitsu NFSP briefing on the 4th of July. If we turn to page 2, we see in the right-hand column that you're there to talk about capacity management, transaction monitoring and event management, as well as major incident history. Do you recall why you were asked to give this talk to the NFSP?
I think it's possibly because there had been in that particular period, or leading up to that period, a number of major incidences, and I think it was effectively to confirm that and acknowledge that we'd had them, what had been done about them, and effectively how many actions came out of them, and to give them a level of assurance, and also to allow them to pass on any feedback and comments around each of those scenarios, each of those incidents rather. But it, again, a long time ago, so I think.
Do you recall when you were drafting the content of the briefing, was that reviewed by anyone, or was it your own work?
I think it was my own work.
And did the Post Office have any input into the briefing?
Don't believe they did directly.
You say directly.
I may have discussed it with whoever at the time to give them an overview of what we were doing and whether they were comfortable with that. And
do you recall from anyone having any pressure put on you as to what should go in the briefing? Can I ask you to turn to page 40? Sorry, can I ask it to turn to page 4? The screen to go to page 48, please. Thank you. This is part of the problem management section in which you gave a presentation. And you provide a problem report and you give the example of counter transaction processing. And the summary states, last week we analysed the milliseconds each transaction takes and found an issue in the recent version of the IBM Tivoli software that has affected counter transaction performance. Most of the counters now have this version of the software. We are still well inside SLA, but it is not as optimum as we would usually prefer. So is it a fair summary that this problem that's been picked here is that transaction times were intermittently taking longer than expected?
Yes.
How much longer are we discussing in this case?
Again, I'm going to suggest it's in the milliseconds, and as is alluded there, we are within SLA, but it's something we picked up, and we are informing both Post Office and the National Federation as our postmasters.
Can you recall why you chose this as the example problem?
Possibly because it's a proactive update.
Did you discuss problems such as the receipts and payments mismatch bug?
I don't think so, unless it's in the list. In the presentation.
In the presentation.
Apologies. Then not. I don't know, and I can't recall what the scope was. Whether I just went back 6 months, whether I went back whatever. But no, it wasn't mentioned if it wasn't on that slide.
Can you explain why you use this problem rather than a more significant problem like the receipts and payments mismatch bug?
No, I can't.
Do you think choosing this as a problem was a fair reflection of the problems in the Horizon IT system?
I think at the time possibly I was trying to get a balance, because again, as I say, we'd gone through a period where there had been some major incidents, and I was trying to give some closure and some level of confidence that we were kind of over that period. And this particular one would have been, I don't recall exactly, but possibly would have been fairly current. I can't say at this moment where either of the two other investigations you're referring to, where they were, whether I had something substantive to be able to provide.
Well, this was in 2012, this presentation, so the receipts and payments mismatch bug was in 2010.
Yeah, so I don't think the presentation would have gone back 2 years.
That's what I want to deal with on problem management. Just before I finish, I wanted to go back to a document I took you to right at the start. It's FUJ 58375. And forgive me for the jumping around in the chronology. It's the direct interface testing specification. Please could I ask that we turn to page 11. So I took you earlier to what it said about pinnacles, pinnacles being recorded. And this says IT services at the top. This is the next paragraph. IT services will fax details of incidents raised to Pathway. Now, where it says IT services there, is that referring to Post Office?
I believe it is.
It says IT services will fax details of incidents raised to Pathway. If any incidents are found to be software or hardware faults, these will be entered into Pinnacle. A copy of the Pinnacle report will be faxed to HAPS. And it's HAPS Post Office.
I think HAPS is external in Farnborough.
We look at may help to look at page 3. Just for your assistance, and the abbreviations.
Yeah.
HAPS, Pockle Host Automated Payment Service. So is that a branch in Farnborough?
memory may be vague, but I think HAPS themselves were based in Farnborough. So I think the initial, no, I could just be completely wrong here. It could be that IT services provide us the facts, we then raise the Pinnacle and then we send it back to them, but then I don't know why it's worded that way.
So is that the wording being raise the Pinnacle? They inform Fujitsu of the problem. Pinnacle's raised and the Pinnacle's fax back to.
Yes, why it says HAPS and it doesn't say IT services, I'm unsure, because HAPS to my mind is effectively third party and is Farnborough based, rather than IT services, which would have been back to Post Office.
And could we turn to page 12 of this document? And down to section 7. It says responsibilities, test sign off. This will be via a handover meeting at which the interfacing systems will give their approvals. And we've got POCL PDA pathway. Could you just explain what that means? Was it the case that all three had to approve the test scripts?
Effectively, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions. But there are questions from... Sorry, may I just turn my back for a moment?
Yeah.
So there are questions from call participants, I believe.
Yeah, certainly. At the moment, I've just got that last document on the screen. So
I'm sorry, sir.
Who's
Sorry,
going first then?
Thank you, Mr. Bansal. Could I just ask you to reflect on your role as a problem manager and then a service SDM? When were you a problem manager? 2010?
Yes.
Right. What I'm going to be suggesting to you is that the white paper was in fact to do with the receipts and mismatch bug. You can't recall that specifically, but if a document were to arise that in fact establishes that fact, you would not dispute it, would you?
I wouldn't dispute it.
No, and so therefore that can be dealt with another witness. But the fact is, there were a number of problems, both when you were a PM and an SDM, to do with Horizon Online. You must have been extremely busy. Do you agree?
It was the role, it was the job.
Yeah. Now, in 2010, there's a document that I'd like to put up, which is FUJ 000 84531. Right, let's see if we can put it up on screen. Okay. Right. Now, can we just have a look at this? Page 1, we can see, and thank you, could you scroll so that we can see the, yes, thank you, just there. We've got, and can you just make the screen a little bit smaller, please? That's fine. Maybe a little bit bigger to your previous position, forgive me. Just wanted to be sure that nothing had been cut out. Yes, thank you. So we've got, at that point, a number of peaks. There are 25 on hold, correct?
Yes.
3 are impacting. Does that mean that they have some adverse effect on the system because they are impacting? Is that the description given?
I'm not sure if they're out for impacting.
Right.
So
The fact is that impacting often has a deleterious connotation, doesn't it, at times?
So I believe they were out for assessment.
Yeah. You've got investigation, which is, again, it's not resolved. So hold is not resolved. Investigation is not resolved. What does monitoring? Obviously, you're just waiting to see whether it's going to get worse. Is that right?
They are monitoring to see what is happening, yes.
Right, exactly. Release to live. What does that mean, please?
Release to live means that they are being packaged and distributed.
And then to be closed tomorrow, that means that they are supposed to be sorted.
Effectively, they could be the ones that are currently on monitoring.
Right.
A period has been agreed, and that potentially is tomorrow.
And then waiting fix means that there's 14 that are awaiting resolution.
Correct.
So really, we've got roughly, haven't we, 60 issues that you're not on top of, because you've got 25 on hold, 19 which are being investigated, and 14 which are awaiting a fix. Roughly 60.
That's what I think it says, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Could we just scroll up, please? And why is it called prayers, as a matter of interest?
I think it was just a given name. I've no idea. This is dated a couple of days after I joined, but yes.
So sometimes prayers means heaven help us. I mean, you can't think why there was that sort of... was it an acronym? Did it stand for anything? Or was it, oh my God, you know, look what we've got to deal with?
I couldn't say.
You couldn't say. You never asked.
Never asked.
Right, okay, scroll up, please. Thank you. Pat Lywood. Who was Pat Lywood?
Pat Lywood was a member of the post office account. I can't remember her exact role.
Right. Well, don't worry. Let's just scroll up a little bit further, please. See, we've got Mr. Goddesseth there as well. Do you notice his name?
It's not jumping out at me, but yes, it will be.
Don't worry. Torstein Goddesseth. But carry on, please, if you scroll up. And a little bit further up, please, so I can get to the text of the message, if you please. Yes. And isn't there a suggestion that here you're being asked if there's anything you can do to speed things up? I think there's some further text down below. If we carry on, please, if we scroll up.
Yeah, I think you can see it's a communication.
Yes, there we are. Sarah P, Ian T, Sheila, please could you take a look at the ones on you and try to resolve some of the hold investigation ones. So this was basically a constant battle, wasn't it?
It was an update communication to everyone to see if they can address any peaks to speed things up, yes?
I mean, a constant battle with instability and errors, wasn't it?
It was a call to address the peaks, yes.
60 of which were, you know, as you've already said, remain to be resolved. Could we now move on, please, to POL 000029493, please? I'm so sorry, I thought that was notified. So it's 000029493. Now that's interesting because I actually have it on my system and it's one of the ones that I was allowed to ask. But don't worry, we don't need to put it up. I just want to ask you, please, just very, were you aware that this was a retro engineered system, the way in which it had been eventually allegedly made acceptable was to reverse engineer it, Rather than prospectively design a logical system, it was essentially dealing with a number of problems and trying to reverse engineer it. But at the same time, when that was happening, further problems were being introduced. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't necessarily aware of that.
You weren't told that. Fine. Could we move on, please, to POL 000 29460? And this is a major incident report, and you're the owner. And could I ask you, please, to help me? Was that data up? Familiarise yourself, please, with the document. Has it been shown to you in advance?
Possibly.
Well, do make yourself familiar with it. Tell me when you're. It would help if you could let the officer know, who is very kindly assisting in scrolling up. So you just let her know when you need to read more of the document.
Could you scroll up?
I'd like you to concentrate, please, on the first 3 paragraphs within the box analysis of problem. Obviously, you must read everything, but I want you to give particular interest to Post Office Limited down to 1st of February.
Yeah. Are we also able to go down to the root cause?
Yes, of course, please do. I'm not trying to.
Okay, then if we could go back to that section.
Of course, Mr. Bansal. Right, now my question is that this is described as an update, but if you see the second paragraph in analysis of the problem, this was a second iteration of the data as a problem had been identified with the initial data set that had been supplied during validation of the token data. The CTO update was in effect a primary package within an incremental update. Was the data update, in fact, actually a fix because of the problem identified within the initial data set?
I couldn't tell you.
You couldn't say.
I couldn't say this at this moment in time.
Don't worry. I now have permission, sir, to refer to POL 000 28830. And we can see the date of this. This is the 28th of September 2010, and it relates to peaks Papa Charlie 024765 and Papa Charlie 0204263, and then 64 and 63 is again mentioned. Can I just ask you, please, to look at this document, which I have permission to put to you. So again, if you could inform the officer who is presenting it.
Okay, if we could go up.
You can see there, can't you? Receipts and payments mismatch. If you go back, Papa Charlie 0204263 describes a problem with SU balancing that will result in a receipts payments mismatch. So given the fact that that is authored by Gareth Jenkins, we can fix his knowledge as to that problem in September, and isn't that the white paper that you were...
I believe that this is the white paper I was referring to.
Well, I'm very grateful, sir. Thank you very much for your time and your patience.
Are there any other questions?
No, sir, that's everything. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Bansal, for coming to give evidence to the inquiry and also being very flexible about the time when you started giving evidence and the progress of your evidence. And that's helped us to move along efficiently. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, sir. That concludes today's, but we have Steve Macau tomorrow.
Right, so that will be at 10 o'clock, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Is it just Mr. Macau tomorrow?
Yes, it is.
Right, fine, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
See everyone tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.